Welcome to Rocket Ship, the home of epic React Native content. I'm Simon Grimm, creator of Galaxies.dev, and today's guest is Matt Palmer, developer relations and vibes at Replit. Thanks for joining me, Matt.
Awesome, yeah, thanks so much, Simon. It's a great day to be here.
Yeah, I caught your attention lately. You made some videos about Replit. I made a video about Replit. There's a lot going on about AI in general, building apps, shipping apps quickly, and today I'm really excited to dive into how this process works with Replit because there's a lot of expo going on at Replit, as we will see in our discussion. And the videos you've published on YouTube show that you can go from like idea to published app in probably like 20 minutes total, 25 minutes total, which is like crazy if you think back a couple of years. So I'm really excited about these, talking about possibilities and limitations, probably also of AI tools, and also about some tips for developers who might think that, oh, this whole AI stuff is not for me. I don't need this. I'm a good coder. But I'm pretty sure, like, especially if we look at prompt writing, improving your prompt writing skills and those sort of stuff, that's something also seasoned developers should be interested in. So I think I have the right person here with me today. But first, I want to congratulate you because I noticed that you are one of the last persons probably who has a guest book on your homepage. And I've always said this in last episodes to some people for fun, like, bring the guest book back. Why did you add a guest book?
No, for sure. Yeah, and that it's funny, that was a few months back, kind of like early LLM stuff, and a really cool framework came out called Fast HTML. And so if you're unfamiliar with Fast HTML, it's like a way to write front-end stuff with Python. There are many ways to write front-end stuff with Python. Many of them are not very good. Some of them are pretty cool. Fast HTML is kind of an exception because it allows you to basically generate like templated HTML components using Python, all Python. And so I was like, I was in touch with the creator of the library. And I was like, this would be a really fun demo. And so one of the great things about Replit, we can get into this later, is like I made this demo and then I was like, well, I have this guest book. I need to deploy it and then just link a custom domain. So it was like a very, easy, like, I made this demo. Let's just add it to my blog. You can go on my blog. You can, talk smack, do whatever you want to, leave your name. Yeah.
I love it. I totally love it. I think I will add a guest book for fun as well to my page, just because it's so like 90s vibes or something.
It is, dude. It's crazy. It's like old school kind of internet, like, I feel connected to this person somehow.
Yeah. I by the way, left a comment on your guest book as well. So you could check it later. Before we get into Replit and all the other topics, maybe you could tell us a bit about yourself. As I already mentioned, you work as the developer relations guy at Replit. What else are you doing currently, and what's your position mainly about?
For sure. I would love to talk. And, like DevRel is one of those things where it means something different everywhere you go. But we can get into that. So yeah, I'm Matt, currently running DevRel and a lot of product marketing stuff at Replit. So if you're a Replit user and you get emails like sharing examples of things people have built, talking about what's new in the products, I'm probably the one writing those emails. If you follow us on X, if you follow us on YouTube, you'll probably see too much of my face, honestly. So I apologize.
Yeah,
I do my best.
The Replit videos have your face. I've seen it.
There you go. So my goal really is just to help people understand the amazing things that they can do with AI and specifically with Replit. And so I see it as my job to kind of like educate and inform everyone about, the amazing things, again, the amazing things you can create to live up to your fullest potential, to just like take advantage of all the stuff that's out there, because as we'll get into today, there is a lot of stuff out there, right? And so I can summarize it. I can do all the hard stuff and make all the mistakes for you and then give you guys the best content possible. But in a nutshell, that's kind of how I see my job.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of see myself as this sort of aggregator as well. And I think Andrew Huberman calls himself that as well. In like the science terms, he's reading through papers and then summarizes in an easy way. And you do the same for AI, and I try to do the same for React Native and Expo. We're all like these aggregators and try to make it easy in some sort of way.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. Yeah, I don't know about comparing myself to Andrew Huberman, but I do enjoy his content. But I think about it like I make like things are hard. Life is hard. It's hard to figure out the right things to do, even if you want to solve a simple problem, right? Like even if you want to do something like build a mobile app, like how do I do that? Even a couple of years ago, I had no idea how to do that. And then I learned about Expo and React Native, and we made those available on Replit. But even still, figuring out all the little discrete steps that you have to go through and running into bugs, it took me like an entire morning. It took me like a long time to like troubleshoot all this stuff. But then once I got it, you're able to like distill that down into a little package, put some polish on it, and ship it to people, and then they can do the same thing in 20 minutes. So I think that's really the amazing thing about content creation, and the amazing thing about the internet is like you can prompt AI for like 99% of things, but then the other 1%, you go on YouTube and you watch or you listen to your podcast, right? And you're like, oh, okay, now I can save myself even more time and take things even more to like the next level, right? By learning from others.
That was always the fun part. Like, I always felt when I create a new video tutorial, whatever, the longer it took me to create that stuff, the more I knew this is going to help people, because in the end, you combine it into like 10, 15 minutes or something. But you've probably worked on that like 2 days until you finally found that easy solution. So that's always
Yeah.
one of the like biggest joys of creating content, when you know you can save a lot of time for people.
Yeah. And there's always like 2 or 3 steps where you're like, oh, so, this isn't documented. You'll never figure this out unless you just sit down and spend an hour messing around with it. But just don't do this thing, right? So.
Right. So we've mentioned Replit a couple of times. And to be honest, I don't think that most of the people listening here actually know what Replit is. And I think I couldn't describe it. I know what I can do with Replit. I feel like I stumbled upon Replit over like a couple of years ago. But maybe you can give us like a quick overview about the history. Where did Replit come from, and how did it come to like the whole AI stuff now?
For sure, totally. So Replit started out as a simpler way to write code. Today, I'll just take a step back. Today, Replit's the fastest way to turn your idea into a working application. But Replit really started out as a place to just make writing code easier. Throughout Replit's history, which we've been around for like 5 or 6 years, maybe longer, we have developed a workspace that is optimized for like just being able to run stuff as fast as possible. I was going to put it very simply. What that means in practice is you can go to your browser, open a new tab, go to replit.com. And when you click create, we're going to give you an environment. So we're not just giving you code or something that you install on your computer, but we're actually creating an entire environment for you in the cloud. If this is a more technical audience and you're familiar with like a dev container, that might be a nice kind of like parallel to draw, except we have
Is it basically like Stack Blitz?
It's different in a few ways. So we can talk about how it's different.
Cool.
So like if you have a container, with that parallel that's running in the cloud, StackBlitz, I believe, is running in the browser. So it's like a WASM type thing. If you have a container that's running in the cloud, you can install any package. So you can do Python. You can actually use like pretty much any language. Most of our users are creating in JavaScript or, JavaScript flavors or Python these days. But when you go to replit.com, you click create. You're not using our AI tools. We're spinning up an environment and we're dropping our workspace on top of it. The amazing thing about that environment is that anything that runs inside of that environment that you edit can be deployed in a single click. So first, again, to take a step back, you don't have to install anything. We pre-configure everything for you. So you click new, you write some code, you click run. If it runs, you click deploy, then you have a website. So 0 to website in like a couple minutes, right? And this is even faster than if you're gonna like install CLI or try to configure your own tools. Now, for the more technical members of our audience, of course, maybe you have your own ways of doing things. But what we found is that a lot of our users really appreciate just how fast they can take their ideas and turning it into something that works. And often, even for myself, when I'm trying to build projects, it's just like the thing I want is to actualize this thing in my mind and start iterating on it. And I just need to get it. I need to manifest it somehow, or I need to show it to someone somehow. And so Replit is a really, really fast way to do that. Now, about, I guess, 6 months or so at this point, all this, AI has just bloomed. It's crazy. It's just moving too fast. We built what's called Replit Agent on top of our platform. So now imagine this workspace that you have that runs in your browser. You don't have to install anything. A couple other points to mention. You can also add databases. So Postgres databases, serverless Postgres with Neon with a single click. You can add object storage with a single click, all from the same tab. We just gave Agent access to this entire workspace. So you go to replit.com, you have Replit Agent, you type in a prompt, hey, help me build a calendar app that does XYZ. It's going to do that. It has access to all of the same tools you have in the workspace. It can create a database. It can connect the database to your backend or your front end or whatever. It can create a full stack application with a backend and front end. Again, because this is its own container running on our infrastructure. It can be a mix of Python, it can be a mix of JavaScript, it can be a full stack application, and it can help you deploy it. So because the workspace exists, because we have agent, we're able to create this autonomous AI program basically that can help you take an idea from zero to an app and deploy it in like 15 minutes or so. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what Replit is today.
Okay, that's exciting. And I think I used Replit a couple of months ago. I tried to also did exactly what you just said. I always had this idea of doing a mobile game, like a trading game where I can go around with ships and buy and sell goods. And I tried to use Replit because I've Googled around and I thought Replit actually is really legit the best way to do that stuff. I tried some other tools, they weren't that great. And I think I tried it one evening and I was instantly sold, like on the initial stuff that I saw with Replit. So I put in my credit card and I'm like, yeah, come give me more of that. I'm happy to pay, like, I don't know. It was just a super cheap pricing. I don't know where your pricing start, but it was definitely okay for me to say, hey, shut up and take my credit card. Apparently that game haven't turned out yet. But that might happen at a later point because last week, or maybe when this recording comes out, a couple of weeks ago, you also added Expo to the mix because previously I think Rebel also tried to first build me a Python application. I'm not so into Python. And I said JavaScript. Yeah, it was okay. It gave me a web application and some React code, and I could probably transform this to React Native. But now you also added Expo. Is this new for Replit now, or did this exist before as well?
Absolutely. This is relatively new. I'll give you a little timeline just so for our listeners, right?
Yeah.
And this isn't information I tell people all the time, but it's really useful. So September or so, Agent was launched. Again, if you tried this a few months ago, most of the first templates we released were kind of like Python backend, Flask, Flask with a vanilla JavaScript front end. We then iterated on that, added in React support. So we support full stack React apps, we support full stack Python apps with like ShadCN, Framer Motion, all that stuff, right? Then we moved on to just kind of like a couple of weeks ago, adding full Expo support to Replit. It's not in Agent quite yet, but we have an Expo template that is honestly maybe simpler to build with. Today, just to cut when this podcast will have been released, Claude 3.7 just got integrated into Replit. Like I clicked the post button to like announce this like before joining this podcast. So now Replit Agent is building with, by the time you listen to this, Sonnet 3.7. It's bringing you the best AI possible to build these full stack applications. And we have a template that supports building with Expo. The entire platform supports building with Expo as well. So you can click Remix. I have a couple videos on how to do this. Configure everything that you would normally configure with Expo. It's honestly faster because of, kind of the cloud native nature of Replit, and then start pushing stuff to your phone.
Is there a difference to saying remix on a template or starting in Replit and saying build me a mobile app?
Yeah. So if you go to replit.com and you type build me a mobile app, we're going to use Agent. So like that is don't actually do that because right now Agent doesn't support building mobile apps. So when you click Remix, this is kind of cool. Since we have a more developer-centric audience here, when you click Remix, it's like forking a GitHub repo, except you're forking an entire environment, not just a repository. So when you click Remix on a Replit app, we're going to drop you into a link with an entire pre-configured environment that just runs. It has all of the npm packages. It's like packages are all installed, system dependencies are all installed. The thing is pre-configured, so you only have to click one button. And so clicking Remix is like forking that environment, so to speak, for our more technical users, and it allows you to just go. So for Expo specifically, you'd want to remix our Expo template and then use Assistant, which is, we have Agent, which like makes a bunch of structural changes, and Assistant, which is kind of like a chat, quick edit type tool.
Okay, so a couple of questions. By the way, Claude 3.7, does it bring a huge change, or like is it? I haven't read all the news.
Yeah. No, in my experience, and I've only played around with it. I just switched all my like coding, not only prompting but like Claude.com type stuff to it. The quality seems materially better. You can look at the benchmarks. Okay. I think the benchmarks are materially higher. Grok 3 got released like 3 days ago. I haven't even had time to like see what it looks like in practice. So by the time this video comes out, I think people will know.
Okay, so I can. as you said, I can use the remix for the template. And by the way, if you say in September the agent came out, um, like you've had 5 years or 6 years of Replit before. Did it accelerate like over the last half year with AI tools, or like how was the trajectory of Replit before? Is it now growing like crazy with all the AI stuff, or what's going on?
It's insane, man. It's absolutely wild. Every day, on LinkedIn, on X, like I talk to people a lot. I talk to users on YouTube. I have people texting me like, dude, I didn't know you worked at Replit. Like, I just heard about this thing today. Like, I saw your video, and I'm like, I haven't talked to you in 5 years. What do you want from me? It's like, on Friday, like 4 days ago, Elon retweeted one of my
Yeah.
videos, and it did 15 million impressions like overnight. It was insane. You know, you want to talk about having people in your DMs and stuff. It's been crazy. So like that is like it is kind of exponential, just the amount of traffic and interest we've seen from the community, and examples of people that are taking this and building really cool stuff, that are building businesses and building apps that weren't possible before.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because you said you integrated Claude 3.7 and you kind of benefit from those advancements. And I was reading through your blog, and I must say, you're a nice part-time writer. You could write a book, actually. You have these nice little thoughts. And there was one that caught my attention, build for where you want to be. And you said, build products that get better with the underlying model. This starts with imagining what could be possible, disregarding what is possible. So basically, because you're building on top of these models, Replit will automatically get better over the next time, right?
Well, first, thank you. I appreciate that. You join like 4 other people that read my blog, so uh, I appreciate that, and I put a lot of effort into those posts. But yeah, that post came out from what I'd been seeing in the Valley and in SF. I live in San Francisco, and I think it became a meme where OpenAI would drop a new model, and people would be like, "Oh no, OpenAI killed my startup," right? And it turned out that the startups that OpenAI was killing were just wrappers and prompt engineering on top of ChatGPT or whatever. And so the fundamental error there is that those people are saying AI is going to stay the same, and what I need to do is build improvements on top of this model as a product. If you build improvements on top of the model as a product, the next version of the model will kill your product, right? Because that's what the models are going to do. The models are going to get better. That's what like kind of these scaling laws are telling us. But if instead you build something that gets better as the model gets better, your product fundamentally improves as the model improves, your product is just going to keep getting better, and it's going to be a rocket ship, right? And so that's one of the things I loved the most about Replit when I joined, is I said, this product is really awesome, right? And now AI comes along, and it's like, okay, well, fundamentally what Replit has is the platform that allows you to write code. And then we're taking AI and we're giving it access to the underlying platform. And so as AI gets better, it's going to get better at writing code and using the tools on the platform to create things. And again, that's that kind of virtuous cycle that I talk about in the blog post.
Yeah, I definitely see it. So yeah, good bad at Replit, definitely. So let's talk about the Replit app as well. We got a nice little expoception going on with the app. Because the Replit app itself is actually built with Expo, and since a couple of weeks, you can also build Expo apps in this Expo app. So let's get down into all of this. Do you know a bit more about the Expo app itself? When did you create this? Do you know why it was built with React Native, or is this beyond what you're looking into?
Yeah, no. So as a DevRel, right, I talk to our engineers. I am an engineer. I used to, work in a professional setting that way. So I have an understanding, and I understand why we chose React Native. Obviously, it makes it really, and Expo specifically, makes it really easy to develop for multiple platforms. So we can publish to Android, we can publish to iOS, we can publish to the web, all of these amazing things. And I know our mobile engineers really appreciate it. And it kind of creates this, like you said, expoception, where you can build Expo apps on an app that was built with Expo. So amazing. If you want to do that, you should check out the videos. And I know we have some really talented engineers that worked on that in the past, built it up, and currently maintain it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just using the app, and honestly, the app itself is it's just a pretty great application. Just like outside of all the things Replit is doing, but how you switch between the views, how you go like from chat to preview, how you search things. for everyone interested in like good React Native apps, go get the Replit application because it's really like it looks really good. I just have to admit this. And
Amazing. I mean, our designers have been hard at work on that. So I'm sure, shout out Zaid, Amon, Vic, all the people that worked on that app, the other designers, Adriana, and then Ian on the mobile team. And there's a
by the
ton of
way,
people that worked on
how many people work at Replit? How big is the company?
it. It's like 70 or 80 now. We're growing, we're
Okay.
hiring people. So if you're looking for a job, replit.com/careers. But we're staying pretty lean and we're still cranking out, for a team that manages all these surfaces and platforms. It's one of the most lean companies I've worked at.
Yeah, it's always fun when I talk to the people of Expo. They have like all these EAS stuff and they constantly ship out new SDKs and do everything. And then I'm like, how many people do? Well, like 40, 50 maybe? It's like, how many, like it's Evan Bacon alone is like the working.
Yeah,
On, so.
an Expo member came by our office maybe last week, a week before. He was like, yeah, like I built that EAS stuff, the Metro bundler, like I built that. I also run our Twitter account, and I'm like, oh, sick.
Oh, was it Cedric or who's it?
It's escaping me. I've been too busy to remember things today, so
No problem. So, coming back to what you said, if I want to get into the process of creating an application with Replit, I should remix the template. But can I also start in the mobile app and say I want to build a mobile app, or would you say this is also giving me like a bad result, or is it the same? Like if I say on the web, give me a mobile app, and in the mobile app, give me a mobile app. If that
okay,
makes sense.
sweet. Yeah, let's take a step back. At a high level, the mobile app and the web app are exactly the same. So anything you can do on the web, you can do on your phone. You can do on our desk. We also have a desktop app that's if you want to download a desktop app. Agent, which is our chat, our natural language, component to the application, does not currently support Expo. So if you want to build an Expo app, the bottom line is click the link that will probably be in the description of this video and click Remix. You can do that on your phone. You can do that on the internet. That's what our best route forward with React Native. Separate from that, if you want to build an app really fast, that's like a web app currently, we will probably support Expo in the future. But if you want to build like a web app or something that you build on your laptop, you can use a Replit agent, and it's a really great way to get started. So for Expo specifically, remix the template.
When I click on the template on mobile, what will happen? Will it just take me to the Replit app, or
I think it should. At this point, your guess is as good as mine. I think on mobile, if you click the template, it would take you to the Replit mobile app. I might be wrong on that, so don't hold me to it.
Okay, no problem. So I don't want to be critical about this, but I want to have an open discussion because there are other tools out there as well. Replit is not alone on the market. I mean, probably Replit is unique for the whole, what you described previously, the whole workspace thing that it spins up in the container you can deploy. But there are other tools like V0, of course, from Vercel, and then just like 2 days after you announced Expo support, Bolt also announced they have Expo support. So Bolt is from StackBlitz, I think. So what's the difference between Replit and those tools? And like, do you just all do the same things, or why should I use Replit?
I mean, this is important, right? I get this all the time. There are a lot of AI tools out there. I'll go to events and I'll talk to people, and they'll just start name dropping AI tools.
Yeah.
And it's kind of clear they don't, may not understand them as much as they should. But it's easy because stuff comes out every single day. It's hard to stay up to date. So I can break it down for you. I think one of the most important things as a developer relations engineer, as a product marketer, is to be honest with people about exactly what the product does and exactly how it's different, maybe why it's better, and if it's for them, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody just wants to make the best stuff possible, and that's my job. And if you can make the best stuff possible in a different way, I want to help you do that. So fundamentally, we talked about why Replit is different. We have this workspace that can run in a single browser tab. It can run pretty much any language. And I think what you'll find is that there are actually very few tools that can do that, right? So like V0, StackBlitz, whatever, they're optimized for front-end code. They're limited to doing that. I think StackBlitz is, if I'm not mistaken, WASM, so it's running in your browser. I think at the moment it's only executing JavaScript. At the same time, most of these tools don't have the external services that we do. So what kind of sets us apart? And there's a really great graphic I'll send to you, Simon, that from Lenny's newsletter that kind of like breaks this down very visually, is that if you're looking for a place to create full stack applications that have databases, that have cloud services, where you don't need to leave your browser tab in both Python and JavaScript, as far as I know, Replit's the only place you can do that. like V0, again, really good front end stuff. If you're like hardcore Vercel dev, like you're doing everything in Vercel, it has some really great integrations with Vercel, right? You have to use the Vercel CLI. You can pull it into your environment and then you can deploy it or whatever, connect all your Vercel stuff. If you really love front end development or, like some of these other things, or you want to connect all these other external services, like there are other options out there as well. But specifically for Replit, the use case we're finding, the people that get the most benefit from these tools want to do everything in a single browser tab. They want to go to this browser tab. They don't want to install anything. They can click add Postgres database. They can click, like add object storage. They can prompt agent. They can prompt assistant, do all this stuff. Nothing gets installed on their machine, and then they deploy it. And in terms of creating full stack applications, as far as I know, Replit's the only tool that does that.
Makes sense. Yeah. I can see the differences to V0. I think V0, it really helps if you're a React Next.js developer, because like the integration with ShadCN as well, like you can pull that stuff down and get it instantly in your project from like the chat. And what I've seen, at least with Bolt and Stackblitz, is that we definitely don't have that. It runs in a web container, but you quickly get like the QR code and run it in your Expo Go application. So you have this really quick integration, which might actually be in the future something which was called Expo Snack, existed in the past. I don't know if you heard about that before. It wasn't so great, but basically if you can instantly share a working example of an Expo application, that's something really helpful for developers. Like just think about GitHub issues and stuff. And I think that might be possible soonish with Stackblitz or what they came up in the background. But that is totally a different use case than what Replit does, as you just described. It's for people who want to ship things and build things. But I would also love to get, because you said you're honest about this. So what are the possibilities and limitations of Replit? I know when I got started, and I had this huge idea of like, I want to build a patrician style game. I don't know if you heard about this. This was like
What's that?
Yeah, it was like a Europe game where you like trade and you go with ships to cities and sell goods, and you rise up in politics and stuff, like all of that. I wanted to build that with Replit, but I had a hard time because it was a lot and had a very concrete idea of what this should become. So what do you think? Maybe you can also give some examples of actually things that were built with Replit. So what's possible, and do you also think there are still limitations in what's possible in this kind of new creation?
Well, everybody's building with AI. So first, nobody is building like the next is building Uber with AI, right? Like you're not going to build. You just sit down in a half day, build an application that has millions of users and all these like complex engineering feats, right? Like that's a massive undertaking. So in terms of like what's possible, like this is a really good question. And who Replit is for, right? Fundamentally, we'll start with who Replit is for. I'll go into what's possible. Fundamentally, right? I talked about the container, like these virtual environments you're creating in Replit, and we find that it's really good for Python or JavaScript applications.
Python environment locally is the pain in the backside. I've noticed this before.
So we solve that problem, and Replit specifically, our users, like if you think about something that you have in a single directory on your laptop, a project, an isolated project that you're building. I find Replit is really good for that sort of stuff. You can even install system dependencies. Like if you want to install FFmpeg in a REPL, it's a little tricky, but we got a technical audience here. It's not too bad. If you just like read some docs, you'll be able to figure it out and get that running. So single project, single directory projects that don't require Docker, don't require like Kubernetes or any of that stuff. That you want to see a result very quickly, really great on Replit. And then once you layer in AI, it's kind of like, how good are you at building with AI, right? Like what can you build with AI? Like that's kind of the limiter, or what can you build on your own? And that's what I've seen, right? Once people start to get into like these really complex workflows, or they're asking me like, how do I like, do GPU stuff in my REPL or my, Replit app? Like, look, I appreciate the tenacity, but like that's not really like the angle. It's really more about building web apps, building projects, building apps with Expo, and these are not like Uber or like these crazy complex applications. So to your point, I think that game should be possible. It probably would take a while. If you start tying in external services, we'd have to talk about that. It takes it gets more complicated and complex, like any sort of application that you're building. The people we see benefiting most from this are semi-technical, well, for the more technical audiences like your own, if you want to build something really fast, if you're like sit down, you have like an hour, or you're like on your phone because our mobile app allows you to build stuff. You start something, you're like getting in a Waymo or getting in a Lyft or on a train or whatever. You want to keep prompting, you want to keep building something. You can take your phone with you and you can build it. That's amazing. You want to get to a prototype to show someone, you can deploy it in minutes. It's kind of like this idea of disposable software, if you've heard that before. It's like, oh man, I want to create something. Maybe it's kind of ephemeral or I don't need it forever and share it with someone. You can do that. Flip side, we also see designers, we see PMs, we see analysts and all these other maybe like semi-technical users who are like picking up these technologies and it allows them to build stuff they couldn't build before. If you're like bottlenecked by, if you're trying to build tools and you're bottlenecked by your DevOps team on what you can deploy, or you haven't deployed something before, Replit allows you to do that really easily. I think for hardcore devs, for more developer-centric audiences, it's really about the ease of being able to spin something up and deploy it fast rather than like reducing technical barriers, because most of those people know how to deploy applications. But
Yeah.
if you only have an hour or you only want to time box something to an hour, don't mess around with your like Vercel deploy stuff. You can just like do it on Replit. You can also SSH into a Replit app, since everyone's technical here. This is like kind of a fun little hack.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
And then I might in my own container and do stuff.
you could. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'll send you some docs on that after the podcast. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was in general interested in like how a bit more experienced developers can integrate these tools, and I try my best. Like we talked a couple of minutes before this recording, and I said it's so hard to keep up with the latest trends. So Claude 3.7 comes out. I have no idea what this is about. Grok is there. I don't know if Grok is better than OpenAI or Gemini, and I'm just happy using Cursor and have plugged in some AI stuff. And if I then add a Cursor config file or something, then I'm like, oh, I feel like a genius, like expert level. But that's basically where I'm currently at.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to like see the possibilities and everything you can do and understand which tool is for which job. So it really helps to understand, okay, Replit is for this specific thing. If you want like quick whatever React prototyping, go to V0, and if you like ShedCN or use something else. But I mean, you're an experienced developer as well, I guess. I just assume from your videos and build Slack with Replit or build whatever in videos. So how do you integrate these tools into your daily workflow?
Yeah. So I'll give you actually a couple examples, because I want to break down like the universe of like how this plays out for me, and how you can just like solve problems and make your life easier, because I'm really passionate about that. I like hate boring or tedious stuff, right? And since we have a Expo, crowd, we have a React Native crowd here, I'll talk about, the React Native side. So going back to what I said about like disposable software, this is like maybe like, a little bit more technical or like not even using agent. Here's a problem I had the other day. My blog, you said you read my blog, right? It was on, I had it on Bear Blog, which is like kind of more of a developer. It's like super lightweight way to write a blog. It's just kind of like markdown, pretty bare bones. Eventually I was like, okay, I'm moving this over to Substack. I flip flop all the time. I do this too often. Anyone here who has ever had a blog and then they were like, I want to migrate my blog. Gee, that sounds like fun. That's a great way to kill a weekend, right? Like it actually just sucks.
Let's use the new static site generator. It was like Christmas last 5 years.
Exactly. Like, it's terrible. And there's a week of your life of like taking Markdown and putting it into a CSV or like uploading some crazy, it's terrible. So what I did, I'm going to have a video out on this in a couple days. Went to Replit. I used Assistant. So I used a Python template. So you fork a Python template, it has everything configured. You can even fork a blank. It's like very easy to configure. Now what I said was, Assistant, hey, I want to migrate my blog. The only way that I could do that to get it into Substack was give it an RSS feed. The RSS feed for my old blog limited it to 10 items, and I couldn't change the 10 items. So it was like, okay, I can only import the last 10 things I wrote. That's terrible. I want to find an RSS provider that actually lists all of the posts with all of the content, because then I would be able to simply do this. None of them existed. So I used Replit to build an RSS feed of my blog. Now you're like, Matt, this is way too complicated already, but it took me 10 minutes. So what I did was I prompted Assistant. I found this library, feedgen. It's a Python library. I said, write me a simple Flask server using Python feedgen that uses beautiful soup to loop through my blog, get all the links, recurse through those links, scrape them, and then populate all of that in an RSS feed. It did it in like 30 minutes, like a couple prompts back and forth, right? Like there was some trial and error there. Take that. Because a Replit app, it runs in the browser, you don't even have to deploy it. The link is live when you're running the
Hmm.
Replit app. I just pasted that into the Substack feed import, and it imported all 60 blog posts or whatever. 30 minutes, migrate my blog. And so, like, this is not saying that, oh, this is the only thing you can use Replit for. It's to say, I saw this problem. I knew that I mapped that problem to, okay, I need something that's deployed and hosting an RSS feed. I need something that can actually generate an RSS feed that can scrape the contents of this website. And, you know, like, I don't want to go through the process of setting up this deployment for something that I'm just going to tear down. It needs to be ephemeral. It is disposable software, essentially. I used Assistant. I prompted my way to it. I got it, did that, saved me like half day, saved me like a weekend, right? That's one example. Moving on, next example, right? Like, say you just want to generate something, for example, like my guest book. This is like a CRUD app, right? It has a front end, it has a back end, it has a database component. I just want people to be able to enter this thing in. I want to experiment with a new technology that I've never built with before. Like, I have no experience with this fast HTML thing. I think it would be cool. Use agent, give it context, prompt, few hours, deployed, and then I have something that works. And I learned about fast HTML. I learned about how these things work. I learned a little bit about databases and about some other stuff along the way. I deployed it. It's already out there. I might as well just tie it into my blog. And now I have, you know, a pretty cool guest book using a new framework. So again, it accelerates the time to learn. It accelerates the time to prototype and to build cool stuff. And, you know, like, I didn't really write that much code. You know, pros or cons there of building with AI. Some people would say that's good. Some people would say it's bad. I'm of the belief that, okay, maybe I didn't write the code, but what I usually do then, so once I have something that works, is I take it apart. It's kind of like, you know, if you want to learn how a clock works, it's probably a lot easier to take a clock that's already assembled and take it apart and look at the individual components. We're talking old school, you know, like
Yeah.
analog clocks, right? And this isn't none of this digital stuff. I,
Not the Apple Watch. Yeah.
I can't even remember the last time I saw an analog clock. But right, the anything. If you want to understand how anything works, it's easier to take something that already exists, code or otherwise, and deconstruct it, rather than assemble it from scratch. You like, think back to every Hello World app you ever wrote, and you're like, oh, you know, I had a paren in the wrong space, and so it took me an extra 2 hours to figure this thing out, right? You can skip all that with AI. So I'm of the belief that you get to something that works, then you deconstruct it, take prompts, just prompt. What is this thing? How do these components work? Explain React Native, explain React, explain why I should use this directory structure instead of this other one. Tell me why that applies to my project. Just like every single question you have, you can get an answer. And if you're really like on top of it and you're really like attentive and conscientious, you can learn so much so fast with AI. So that's kind of my perspective. So sort of a derail there. Third example. So we did like disposable software. We did kind of prototyping. Everybody here is React Native. Everybody here is mobile, right? Okay, so Expo stuff. Fork the Expo template. Maybe you're new to this. Maybe you're like, oh, hey, you know, I'm here. I'm listening to Simon's podcast. I haven't written my Expo app. I'm like intimidated because, you know, everybody says it's hard. I don't understand certain things. Like, I can't configure my environment. Sign up for Replit. Go to replit.com. You click a remix. You have the entire environment. You can click run. It will run. It works. Amazing, right? Like, now what? You watch one of my videos. In 20 minutes, you have something that's on your phone. Actually, scratch that. To get something on your phone, it takes like 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
In 20 minutes, you can actually have like a test flight preview or like a, you know, a preview deployment, a development sort of deployment on your phone. And then, right, kind of what I said, you tinker with AI, you take it apart, you remix it, you start implementing features. And this would be a really great way to learn. It would really be a really great way to build your first iOS app. It would be a really great way to get to a prototype. Somebody on Twitter yesterday shared like basically like a legit just like Pokemon app. Like, you select two Pokemon and then you can have them fight each other. It's an iOS app they built in
Yeah,
like a
I think I
day.
saw it.
Yeah, so you can put that in the podcast notes or something. It's really cool. People are sharing stuff like this all the time. It's like, look, dude, you have a couple hours. You want to like learn. You want to figure out how to build something. You want to get a prototype. I'd say go to Replit. So those are like kind of my three use cases. Maybe you can kind of start to map for our listeners, map some of those problems to some problems you see in your life or some questions you have or things you want to learn. You can use Replit for those.
I will definitely try to use it a bit more over the next time, because I'm a big fan of these. Like, the less code I write, I'm always happy. So today, I'm usually just using Cursor and like Composer or something in there. But whenever I'm working on a tutorial and there's like a blank page, I'm like, okay, agent, on this page, I want to have a user and add some dummy data here, and please use native.
Mhm.
And it's like, and I have the perfect setup for that page. And I'm like, okay, I can start iterating on that. But if you have a
Yeah.
blank page, it's so intimidating. You're like, okay, where do I place a card? Should I use button? And then an hour later, okay, let's remove all of that and start again with a flat list.
This is amazing. Yeah, and basically, there's a tweet from Paul Graham a couple weeks ago. A team is like a design team is just using Replit instead of Figma, like just straight out. They're like, hey, it's actually easier for us to design with like real functioning applications than it is to try and like wireframe something, because like at the end of the day, the best products are built with the user in mind, with like a very specific intention. And when you're designing and building, if you're an engineer, and you're designing and building something, you can actually get a feel for what it's like to use that thing in real time. And it just like condenses that feedback loop, right? Of like, this is more like product than it is developer stuff. But if you're a developer, I think with AI, you are a product person, right? Like you're not just an engineer that just like, hey, do these tasks, do the tasks out, right? No, it's like you're like, how do I think about this thing working? How can I see how I can improve the user experience? And exactly what you just described, it's like being a designer and an engineer and a product manager all in one. I think that's what these tools are really great at.
So in your examples, you said you build a disposable tool with Replit, you build something else with Replit. It sounds like you're only using Replit and the browser environment. Do you also write local code? And follow-up question to this is, what other AI tools can you recommend beside Replit? Like, you're pretty deep into all of this because you love it. You need it for Replit. It makes Replit better. But you have a good overview about the whole like Grok and Claude and whatever might be out there. So are there other tools that you use in your workflow, and like how do you use them besides Replit? And yeah,
Amazing. Yeah, no, and I do. Right. I work for Replit. Um, they pay the bills. So I
sure.
love to share how people can use Replit. I think it's an amazing product. I believe in the product. But there's a ton of tools out there. And I think like, if you want to get started, if you're interested, you go to X, you can learn about all these tools. You go like read news, go to Hacker News, just like start absorbing information, put together a feed reader, go check it out. That's what I've done. Or just listen to podcasts like these. We'll summarize it for you. Yeah, so in terms of models, I've been really relying on Claude for the past 5 or 6 months. 3.5 has been great. I'm excited to see 3.5 V2 has been great. I'm excited to see how 3.7 turns out. What I find is that it really depends on the context that you give to the model. So thinking at a very meta level, the more you can assemble workflows where you provide relevant context to your models, the better outputs you can get. What does that look like? Let's talk about what it looks like in a coding perspective. How do I take what lives on documentation, like an example of the feature that I want to implement, and get that to Claude when I'm trying to implement it, whether locally or whatever? If I'm writing a blog post, can I get an example blog post? Can I get a style guide for how I like to write my blog posts? Can I get all the ancillary information as well as the actual content and get that all to Claude with a really relevant prompt? So if I can get the context together, and if I can prompt engineer well, I'm getting really good outputs. Like I can take a video. I'm working on a flow right now. I take a video, I give it a bunch of context, I give it a bunch of information, turn raw transcripts into like 90% blog post drafts. I go through, revise it, add some imagery. And because at the end of the day, I think I might have mentioned this, it is, if we have any data folks here, it is like ETL. It's like extract, transform, load for data. I'm taking data, I'm transforming it with AI, I'm adding a bunch of context, and then I'm moving it to a different format, to a different platform. And that's what we don't want to spend time on doing that. We want to spend time on creating the content. And so I think AI with the right context can be really, really great for that. Talking about tools. Again, I've found Claude and the models at Anthropic, right, to be excellent. That being said, it's like, you got a tool chest, different tools, different uses. Gemini models. I'm working on a video on how to basically eliminate writing Git commit messages. Gemini models are really great for that because they have really long context windows. So you can stuff 1 million tokens in Gemini 2.0 Flash EXP or whatever. You can stuff 2 million in the Pro version. So I don't want to discredit any models. I've just found Sonnet to be really good for prose and code. Gemini has long context windows. OpenAI has some great offerings with 4.0 and their thinking models 0.1. Grok 3 just came out. I think it's really great. I have a video got retweeted by Elon. It was crazy. Again, it's good. I think we'll
What's
have
the
to.
strength of Grok? Do you know already? Like, in which area does Grok shine the most? Everywhere?
So the cool thing about Grok is like it's not nerfed, so you can just like it's not going to be like, oh hey, I don't feel comfortable answering those questions. Like it'll just tell you, so you can ask it. Since I don't even want it, look, I don't want to end up on a no-fly list somewhere, so I'm not even going to talk about the stuff you can ask Grok. Uh, that's kind of cool. I mean, if you want to mess around with that stuff, it's also just really snappy. The coding examples I've noticed are good. The reasoning examples I noticed are good. I haven't had enough time to play around with it to give you an informed opinion about the like again, you can look at the benchmarks, play with it yourself. I think like consensus might take a few months for people to understand, but that team is moving hella fast. And I know a lot of people on the XAI team, dude. Like the office is like 2 miles that way from where I live. I've been over there. It's insane. Those people do not stop working, and they are like they built 2 data centers in like a couple months. Like it's insane. Like how fast that team is moving. So Rocket 3 is good, and I would not bet against that team in the future. But more specifically, right, like we talked about other types of tooling. There's some really good, I would just say, like, go out and do your research and find all the stuff that exists. I do code locally. There are really great tools for that. There are new tools every day. It's hard to keep up with. There's this new stuff. If you're like really trying to figure out cutting edge stuff, look into MCP, look into the Model Context
Mm.
Protocol from Anthropic. It's like a way, it's a new thing about it as like an API for an LLM, or another common analogy is like USB-C for APIs for LLMs, right? Like it's a one size fits all framework for building things that like tools that LLMs can use to access specific information. More tangibly, what does that look like? Um, I want an easy way for Claude to communicate with my Google Calendar to like perform actions on my behalf. Normally, you'd have to be like prompting Claude, giving a bunch of context, right? Like I talked about, okay, well, like we need to get relevant context to the model for it
Mm.
to do the things we want. MCP is like provides a simple way for anyone to develop essentially like an API that Claude can be like, okay, I know how to do all this stuff. I'm going to do all this stuff, get it done very much more reliably than just stuffing context or giving docs. And there are new coding tools that are really good at using MCP, and I think all the popular ones are starting to adopt that same stuff. But locally, dude, it changes every day. I see the same thing with models. I see people on X. They're just like naming different coding tools that they use. So who knows what that'll look like.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a content creator, it's kind of hard. Like I've been using Cursor now for, I don't know, for half a year or something, and it's still like people on YouTube will, oh, what is this editor? How did you get that code completion? And now it's also in like older videos I used Copilot, and they ask, what code completion did you use? And I'm like confused myself because like I can't switch code editors now every 2 weeks, so I stick
Yeah.
to Cursor. I tried Windsurf. I didn't notice a difference, so I will stick with it for the moment.
All the usual suspects. Yeah, dude, it's crazy. And then like I'll forget, or like, people are referencing my video from like 8 months ago. And I'm like, I completely changed my workflow.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what you want me to say. So
So you said with Claude, you're trying to stuff into like a lot of context to it. And before you leave, I would just quickly love to get some ideas from you about the AI prompt engineering. So it sounds like you know a lot about that stuff. How can we write better prompts? It doesn't matter probably if it's Replit or if it's Claude or
yeah.
whatever kind of model, but especially for developers, like how can we write better prompts? Do you have like one, two, three tips for people that are really practical that I can apply like today or tomorrow in writing my code?
For sure. If you're a real nerd, like research is actually like people like write research papers on how to prompt stuff effectively. So that's cool. You should check that out. You could also, this is meta. This is like expoception. You could prompt AI to tell you how to prompt AI.
Ah, yeah.
Don't like,
I
this
mean,
is,
I mean, I sometimes tell like OpenAI give me the prompt for Midjourney so I can create my image.
yeah.
Like I'm on that level.
So yeah, so here's my workflow. And this isn't like super, this is just what I found to work. So I wouldn't, this is not maybe necessarily researched. What I found works well if you're like having multiple components of a prompt or you want output to come in a certain way. I use a combination of XML and Markdown. So for certain sections in my prompt, I'll like open with an XML tab and a tag, and I'll say like, hey, these are the formatting guidelines for what I want you to return. And then I'll use Markdown to describe the formatting guidelines, and then I'll close XML tag. So it's like, this is what I want you to return, and then the next section is maybe like functionality of what I want you to return. Opening XML tag, Markdown with like very specific instructions on what I want. Closing XML tag. So basically, I think about a prompt. I organize it into sections and like kind of the components of those sections. It might be like formatting, it might be output, it might be like if it's prose, like brand guidelines or like writing style, etc. And then inside those blocks, I add Markdown with the specifics, like very detailed specifics of what I want. I do not write all of this myself. Often, what I'll do is I'll write a prompt and I'll say like, okay, blah, 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 this is what I want to do. And then I'll go to AI and I'll say, enhance this, use these XML tags, use Markdown to give me a more relevant prompt. I get something back. I read it to make sure it's not just AI slop, because like that exists, right? I read it to make sure it's exactly what I want. And then I iterate with AI, change this, change that, move this around, boom, 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 until I have a prompt. That's how I build reusable prompts. Like I'm not doing this for every prompt I send to AI. I'm doing this for prompts that I store somewhere that I use frequently, or that will be a part of a workflow. For the prompts that I'm using every day, it's kind of like some iteration of that. It's a trade-off between like time and effort versus what I get out. But often I'm taking an idea, I'm trying to distill it down into exactly what I want AI to do. First principles thinking, really important. Procedural thinking, very important. Systems thinking, like all of these things. How do I take this idea of the output I want to achieve, break it down into the discrete steps of what's necessary, and then enhance that in a way that is very logical and that we can pass into what is essentially linear algebra and like just like all these sort of statistical machines to produce what I want. That's kind of how I think about it. I feel like we could do an entire podcast on this though.
Yeah. But just because I was thinking about this, does it make a difference if I put into Replit as like the first prompt a super long description of the trading game it should develop? Like, or as an alternative, I put in, hey, I want to build a game basically like this, start with the basic template and then just like iterate on this, and in the next step, okay, now at the trading screen, now at the profile screen, like is there a difference and what is better?
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, right? Like I talk about context. I think it's, and I even said just like put a lot of context into things. It's more important to have accurate context and to have concise, like targeted context. So, in these prompts, it is a trade-off between length and accuracy and like conciseness. In the Replit specific use case, I would say agent MVP. First prompt MVP. I want to get to something that works. So maybe like what's the minimum viable prompt MVP? I'm trademarking that. I'm the first person to say it. What's the minimum viable prompt you can get to create something that works? In the example of your game, maybe it's like very basic functionality, or maybe it's just like literally the UI. And then you get to the UI, and then you're building on that with agent, you're building on it with assistant, and every step along the way. I think that's where kind of what we got to. Maybe one more analogy. Too many analogies. If you think about AI, it's kind of like as AI gets better, the little building blocks get bigger. So like think about AI, think about what it's good at right now, what you can build with a one-shot prompt to your favorite tool or with Replit. Half a year ago, that was like a function. I could say, hey, write me a Python function, and it would work sometimes, right? Like it wasn't good. Maybe it was like literally tab autocomplete. Remember when GitHub Copilot first came out? Like March last year, it was like people were like, oh my goodness, I can tab to complete this variable, right? So that was like the building block. Now, what's the building block? The building block is like one shot. That's what we're figuring out. What should we put in Replit Agent? What is the smallest thing that these tools can reliably create? And what we want to do is the largest thing that these tools can reliably create in the form of like a building block. And what we want to do is figure out what those building blocks look like, and then take the end game goal, our game, break it down into those building blocks as steps, and then say, okay, now create me this thing, because I think it'll work reliably. I debug, add on this thing, right? Like, does this make sense? It's kind of like you're decomposing the problem into these atomic units. The atomic units are determined by how good AI is. And as time goes on, AI is going to be able to build bigger things, right? Like eventually we'll be able to say, just build me the game. And then we're going to be focusing on infrastructure. And we're going to be focusing on the creativity involved in the specific components of the game. But that's how I think about it.
I think we could probably keep talking about AI and prompt engineering for another hour, but our time is mostly over. So
unfortunately, I do work. I don't just yap. So I like to yap, but I have to get back to work at some point.
Right. So let's wrap it up. With Replit, we can now build Expo and React Native apps. Is there anything else planned with the Expo team regarding like making it easier to go from Replit to EAS to publishing the app? Are you still in contact, or is it for the moment you can build apps and we're cool?
You can build apps, and we are cool, but we are also in contact with the Expo team. We're going to be working on making that better. We have a lot of very passionate folks who are excited about that, and we got a really great response from that one. So I'd expect some cool things in the future. Hopefully, by the time this podcast is out. For the moment, we literally just integrated the latest Claude model into Replit, so you'll have to give that a shot once you're listening to this podcast. And yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I will definitely do it after this podcast because I think I kind of messed up my initial try of Replit and Expo because I just said like build me an app and I haven't used that remix functionality. So I will definitely get into that remix functionality and see if that will get me to my trading game. So Matt, thanks for taking the time. It was super interesting to talk about all things at Replit and AI. Where can people find out more about what you do, or what links should they check out?
Amazing. Yeah, no, I am pretty active on X these days, so drop my X profile. I also make videos mostly on the Replit YouTube channel, but also on my own YouTube channel. I'll provide both of those. Otherwise, you can go to my blog. You can sign my guest book. You can find me online. Again, it was great chatting with you. Love your podcast and love some good conversation.
Cool. Thanks, man. Yeah, I will definitely drop all the comments, all the links in the show notes. People can check it out, check out galaxies.dev, and I will catch you in the next episode. So thanks for taking the time, Matt, and all the best for Replit.
Amazing.
Thanks for joining today's episode. My goal is to share interesting stories and insights into the world of React Native development. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And on Spotify and Apple, you can leave up to a 5-star review. Because podcasts, and especially niche podcasts like this, are hard to find, subscribing and leaving a review does help me a lot. On top of that, check out my React Native courses on galaxies.dev that cover a variety of topics from getting started to building and publishing your mobile app. Finally, you can share today's episode with a friend or colleague who would enjoy the topic of the show. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, find me on X or leave a comment on YouTube. And last but not least, thank you for listening and happy coding. Simon.